Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. We're going to begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island, and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island, and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We'll now have a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of our national anthem. Please stand for the playing of the national anthem. We're going to begin with the adoption of our agenda for February 24th, 2026. It will be adopted as presented. Councillor Burns and Councillor Anito Ricci-Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Any disclosures of community interest? There being none. Adoption of the minutes of the closed and regular meetings of council held February 10th, 2026 be adopted as presented. Councillor Segan and Councillor Carrick, all in favor? And that carries. Mayor's comments, just a few. Our Transit Master Plan open house will be held at the Vollmer Culture and Rec Center on Tuesday, March 3rd from 10 to 11:30 a.m. and again from 4 to 7 p.m. This plan will review how transit is operating today and identify improvements needed over the next 5 years to support growth and accessibility in our community. I encourage residents to attend, ask questions, and share feedback. If you're unable to attend, an online survey will be available soon, along with an opportunity to leave comments through PlaySpeak. Community input is definitely critical as we plan for the future of transit in the town of LaSalle. Have a quick update on our Front Road storm sewer reconstruction. Beginning early next week, construction will start on the Front Road storm sewer reconstruction project. The full work zone will be along Front Road from Beaumier to Riem. Lane restrictions will begin Monday, March 2nd between Lafferty and Beaumier. Intersection closures will occur at Maple, Kenwood, Delaware, Sacred Heart, and Beaumier Avenue. Residents should expect major traffic delays. This portion of the project is expected to last a minimum of 2 months. Importantly, businesses will all remain open. However, please continue to support them and follow any detour routes as they are posted. For updates, visit Public Works page on our municipal website. And finally, early bird annual boat passes will be available Sunday, March 1st through March 31st. Regular rates will apply starting April 1st. An attendant will be on site daily beginning Friday, April 10th for the boating season. So again, visit our website for rates and additional information. And finally, someone's celebrating a special birthday today, and I'm not going to say what that number is, but we wanted to wish Mr. Mara a very happy birthday. And that's all I have. We have no public meetings or hearings, no presentations and delegations. So we'll go right into our staff reports and correspondence for council's action. And we have item number 1, which is the OFSA hockey for reduced fees. And I believe Mr. Swatowczyk, I know I'm saying that wrong and I really am sorry, is Swatowczyk? Thank you. Is online. Hi, good evening. So we'll go ahead and let you start because I know you have to head out. Thank you very much. Members of council, do you have any questions for the delegation? Then I'll administration can answer questions afterwards as well. But if you have a question now. Patty, okay. Thank you very much. I don't know if you're able to stay for the rest of the report. If you are, great. If not, I understand. I'm going to turn it over now to administration. Ms. Finero.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I think, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say your name wrong as well, but I will look to Councillor Carrick to help me with it. Mr. Swatowczyk, I apologize. I think he clarified what he's asking for, that they are requesting, or he is requesting, that the time that is not used on the ice the fee would not be charged. As council is aware, we do have a policy when it comes to reducing or waiving fees. The policy is that we do not reduce or waive fees, and that is because, while this is certainly a worthwhile cause, we do have other schools that we rent to, and as you know, many events beyond hockey that support charities and very worthwhile causes, and many of them ask for this same consideration. And so, in order to be consistent, we typically recommend that we do not do this. In this particular case, we did cancel some paying rentals, or we were able to shift them. So we've canceled a few things, and we've canceled some programming as well to hold the ice for these games. So although they may not be using it for that half an hour, the ice will be sitting empty when it's not used. And so that's the reason that we typically don't recommend this. It's not unique to this situation, as you're aware. We recommend this in every case.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carrick.
Yeah, so mine was around the 2 hours. If what they were being paid for if they weren't using it. So thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Segan.
Thank you, Mr. Swatowczyk, which I happen to know who you are, because we coached together in LaSalle Minor Hockey, so I know how to say your name. I think I said it right. You're a very dedicated coach, and I know you give your heart and soul out to what you do, and going beyond your teaching job to do a tournament that's a massive undertaking, because I know I've been involved in the past with that as administrator with the school board. The only question I have And through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask Patty Finaro, do you know what the estimated loss revenues are for the cancellation of all those activities?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Segan. The estimated loss of revenue, sorry, I should have included that in the financial implications. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I believe there was 3 or 4 rentals that we did have to cancel, which would be the standard ICE rental rate, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $200 an hour, as well as some parent and tot and adult skate and sticks and pucks. So those have a drop-in fee associated with them, and some of those are services or programs that are offered to our members and are included with their membership. Certainly, I can get you the exact numbers and send that out afterwards if that's something you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because every decision the council makes, there's a cost, whether it's approved or not. So that's why it's an important question. And I just wondered, because being involved with the Sal Minor Hockey, we don't get a break on the Hometown Heroes Hockey Tournament. So I'd have trouble, even though I think it's a great endeavor that you're doing, Mr. Swiatowski, to change that from the policy or to move it in another direction when we've been pretty consistent as a council. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? There being none, there is a recommendation before you, or if you have something different you want to present. If not, the recommendations that the report of the Director of Culture and Recreation dated February 6, 2026, CR-2026-02 regarding the request from OFSA Hockey for reduction in ice rental fees be received, and that the request to reduce ice rental fees for the March 24th to 26th, 2026 OFSA Provincial Tournament be denied. That is the motion if you are interested, or if you have something different, please let me know.
Support.
Councillor Burns moved, support. Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. Apologize. Unfortunately, it is our policy, but we do thank you for what you're doing with the organization and with the school, and bringing these events to the town of Slough is important. But as noted, we have a lot of these throughout the year, and it would be very hard for us to be able to do this with all organizations. So thank you for taking the time to join us this evening, though. Item 2 is our short-term rental recommendation report. And we have Mr. Peterson. We're going to allow you to go first. So as normal, we have the 5 minutes, so we'll let you know if your time's up, but go ahead. Thank you. And just make sure you turn the microphone on. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Meloche, members of council, administration of the town of LaSalle. When my wife and I moved to our home on a quiet crescent in LaSalle, we hoped to live out our retirement in peaceful, friendly neighborhood. And it was, as my neighbors will concur. But that isn't the case any longer, and hasn't been for the past 14 months. Now, we live next to a ghost hotel. In the WSP report and administrative recommendations before you, the authors distinguish between 2 kinds of short-term rentals. A resident who converts available space in their home, the home that they own and reside in, earning a modest amount of income from renting out space as a short-term rental. This has limited impact, if any, on the neighbors and community at large. These STRs require only licensing and requirements for standards to ensure the safety of guests and the owner-operator. Most, if not all, of the problems with STRs arise from a rapidly growing model, the non-principal residence property, sometimes referred to as multi-listing, commercial, or ghost hotel. These commercial operations feature multiple short-term rental sites locally and across a region. They remove permanent housing from the community. They function in a way that transactions happen online and not in person. They rely on neighbors and police to monitor their STRs and intervene when there's a problem. The investors or owners of these types of STRs are in reality running a commercial accommodation business in competition with hotels and motels without the regulations, business taxes, staff costs, facility costs, property taxes, or participation in the life of the neighborhood or communities where they set up. The Ghost Hotel next to my home has 3 units, up to 12 guests a night, 24/7, 365 days a year, and is listed as part of 12 properties owned by a business, and indicates on Airbnb that each of the 3 units is managed by a separate host. But in reality, it's the same business. Commercial STRs are increasingly dominating the sector. A 2023 report on STRs in Ontario by the McGill University School of Urban Planning states that commercial operators are dominating the STR market. The top 1% earn 15% of all revenue, and 44% of all revenue was earned by just the top 10% of hosts. In the province of Ontario since the pandemic, STRs have grown at an annual rate of 20% per year, with 43% of all STRs listed on Airbnb in 2023 being multi-listings, ghost hotels. Is it a problem in LaSalle? The commercial STR next to our home started in the fall of 2024, and now there are 5 whole house STR rentals in our small corner of the town. It's a lucrative business. I'm very pleased with the direction administration took in focusing on eliminating multi-listing commercial STRs in the town of LaSalle, while suggesting reasonable licensing and regulatory requirements on STRs where the property owner is present and operates 1 unit. The key to success on the zoning and bylaw changes will be the enforcement of compliance. I spoke to a number of councillors from other communities that implemented similar regulations as suggested by our administration and have recently had to revisit their compliance model. In every case, they shared that the problems weren't with the principal residence operated STRs. It was with the ghost hotels. In each case, they raised the consequences for commercial operators and repeat offenders, noting that there was a final rush to compliance. I've offered more complete written suggestions to administration and council, which I hope you will find helpful. I would like to finally acknowledge and thank the Town of LaSalle administrative staff, in particular Roxanne Renault and Gudrun Bakes, for their time and patience in dealing with my concerns and the issues of the ghost hotel next door. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Stralago to present the report.
Well, yeah, I'm really not going to present a whole lot. I will turn it over to Mr. Will Larmond of WSP. As council is aware, we engaged WSP late last year to conduct a comprehensive short-term rental study on behalf of the town. They appeared back in November and provided a background study for LaSalle to kind of set the framework with respect to the policy framework and what's going on in the world of STRs. And from there, they took the feedback received at that meeting, the feedback from administration and the public, and they've now prepared a recommendations report for council to consider. And without further ado, Mr. Larmond will go through his presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. As your clerk noted, we were here before you in the fall to present our findings through our background work, and very pleased to be able to present some recommendations this evening for your consideration, as well as some recommendations from your administration related to sort of the next steps in the project. So we do have a slide, a PowerPoint presentation that I think should be available in a moment. Unless it's not showing on my screen. Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, so we can proceed to the first slide. So just as a sort of a recap of why we're here, I think we're all I'm pretty well aware now, but a short-term rental, STR, as we'll refer to it now, I think for the rest of the evening, is a dwelling unit, or it's part of a dwelling unit, which is used for temporary accommodation for basically a month or less. Typically, it's defined either as 28 or 30 days, but it's no more than a month. Oh, sorry, can we hop to the next slide, please? Thank you. Yeah. So as your clerk noted, we started the project in the fall. WSP has been supporting town staff, and we've completed a background report, which we presented to you in November, and we've now completed a recommendations report. This involves looking at various options, and there are quite a lot of options when it comes to regulation, and developing recommendations for a planning framework as well as a licensing framework. So we'll be talking about a bit of a two-part or a two-tiered system here, and our our expertise at WSP is certainly very much in the planning side of things, but we've done enough of these studies that we have a good sense of the licensing needs as well. Next slide, please. So the key objectives of the study are really to look at as many best practices as possible for regulation of STRs, which is now, there's quite a lot of precedent throughout the province, not to mention the rest of the country and the rest of the world. I mean, STRs are a major issue, and I'm sure many of you have seen, news coming out of places like Barcelona and other, tourism-heavy places, which Airbnb and short-term rentals have had significant impacts. And then our objectives were to identify regulatory gaps, policy gaps that could be filled, and then develop those recommendations. So we're in terms of the project work plan, we're here to present our recommendations and determine next steps for the town. Next slide, please. So through our background work, we heard from the community directly. We did an open house back in the fall. We also posted the background report on PlaceSpeak and received some written comments. And so we were able to really, see the coalescence of community concerns around a few issues. As Mr. Peterson noted in his delegation, there's a lot of concerns around noise, traffic, property neglect. There's a lot of direct impacts that residents, especially neighbors of STRs, are feeling. And in addition, there are potentially more significant concerns around safety and crime, in addition to just nuisance. And then on a more broad, indirect level, there's also the question of housing availability. So these are less sort of direct impacts, but it's overall, is the housing supply for the town and for people to be able to live here permanently being affected. In addition, following the completion of our background report, we were able to bring some of our initial findings to some stakeholders, in particular Tourism Windsor-Essex and Invest Windsor-Essex, as well as the Chamber of Commerce for the Windsor-Essex region. We heard some sort of, again, similar comments from all three groups. Generally, there was support for taking on the study in the first place, but implementing some sort of planning and licensing regime, particularly one that supports balanced competition between traditional accommodations like hotels, motels, inns, and STRs. In addition, there was support for anything that can help ensure compliance with safety, so building, fire code, health code. We also heard some really interesting, sort of specific to their work. One was that if a municipal accommodation tax is implemented for the town, then a licensing framework for STRs can make implementing that tax far more equitable and far more transparent. And then finally, an interesting note is that it can also help the operators themselves, because it allows transparency and knowing about places, being able to advertise them without having to be under the table in any way, allows for the tourism agency to really partner, have a list of accommodations, and really sort of have some synergies and support there. And just to note that the comments from the Chamber of Commerce are attached to the item on the agenda as well. Next slide, please. So getting into the options, what I'll do is kind of lay out some of the options that are in the recommendations report. This isn't exhaustive, just because I want to make sure that we're being efficient with getting to the recommendations, but I think it's important to draw attention to a few things. So one of the first sort of categories of options that we looked at was the type of STR. So really, we're looking at two types. So there's principal residence, or what we've termed as principal residence STRs, and then non-principal residence STRs. In a principal residence only STR, the operator is the full-time resident of the dwelling unit that is being operated as an STR. And I'll just note a couple things there. We're using the term operator as the person who's advertising, making money off of, and day-to-day operation of the STR. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the owner of the dwelling unit. So this does leave it open for those who are renting their dwelling units. If the operator isn't the owner, then our recommendation would be that there is some sort of transparency there, and that the owner has signed off on it being operated as an STR. But based on our research and based on our professional recommendation and our professional advice, there is no real reason to restrict STRs for those who are renting or otherwise aren't the owner of the dwelling unit. And then in addition, I'm using the term dwelling unit as opposed to dwelling. So we're talking specifically about a self-contained unit that is, one household. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the entire building. So it could be a dwelling unit within a larger building, or it could be an additional residential unit. So this option one, I would characterize it as it's less flexible, but it's far more accountable. So there's far more oversight for the town, and there's far more accountability for the operator. They're responsible for the units as their own home, and they are generally going to be on site or relatively close by. It cuts down on the use of STRs as investment properties. The other option is to not apply the principal residence requirement, which some municipalities have done. Now, in this scenario, the operator doesn't live full-time in the dwelling unit. So, they may be the owner, they may not be the owner. They might, be operating several units at once. So that's provides far more flexibility. But the flip side of that is that there's less transparency, and there's a higher potential for issues because the operator doesn't have a direct tie to the dwelling unit. We see this model used in places where there is a really established cottage industry. So, places like Blue Mountains and the Muskokas and Fort Erie, all of which have, cottage rental industries that have been existing for 50, 60, 70 years. And it's very difficult to sort of change course on that. And so that's where it's appropriate. Somewhere like LaSalle, where there isn't that industry, there's less of an argument to really be made for it, because we're not talking about, a cluster of somewhere like a Crystal Beach in Fort Erie, where you've got, potentially hundreds of cottages that have been rented out for years. So those are the sort of the two kind of distinct ownership or operator types. Next slide, please. We've just included this slide just to be able to walk through a little bit quickly of what this scenario would look like, specifically looking at an additional residential unit. I think one of the concerns potentially with the allowing of, an individual dwelling unit rather than the whole dwelling to be operated as an STR is that your mind immediately goes to, oh, well, what if somebody just, builds a basement apartment or, an additional residential unit in their backyard and then operates that as an STR. So under the scenario where it's a principal residence only, basically there's only one scenario where that would be permitted, in terms of an ARU. So the owner or the operator has to be the full-time tenant, and the owner and operator both have to know that it's an STR. So in this first scenario, the owner builds a detached ARU in their backyard. It's a lovely little unit. It's got a kitchen and a bathroom. They rent that to a full-time tenant, and then the tenant operates the STR in the ARU. Say they go out of town regularly for, a few days at a time, they rent it out on Airbnb. The owner knows, the owner consents, that would be permitted. Any other scenario would not be. It would be prohibited. So, the other two examples that we've got here are, that the owner builds a detached ARU in their backyard, and then the owner themselves operate it as an STR, even though they've got a tenant. This is, not a situation we want to encourage where somebody might be facing sort of less or more precarious housing because their landlord is saying, oh, well, actually, you have to go because we're going to rent this, for the weekend or something. And then the other scenario would be where the owner doesn't even have a full-time tenant and is just operating it as an STR. That would also not be permitted under the principal residence. Next slide, please. So licensing. So as I noted, this is sort of the other tier of the two-tier approach. So our recommendations, based on best practices and all of our analysis, is that the town establishes a zoning and an official plan framework that is the planning, and then that is then enforced through a licensing framework. And this is, I would say, the pretty typical approach. There are a few municipalities that have haven't implemented a licensing framework and have only done it through planning. But as we'll sort of see, it's difficult to really enforce that planning regime. So the licensing framework allows for a few key things. It allows for oversight. It allows for registration. It allows for the town to understand where and how many STRs are in operation. And then one of the other key things is that it allows for the town to establish conditions that wouldn't be necessarily available to the town just with a planning framework. Most notably, inspections. You can add a condition for a renewal of a license that the unit gets inspected. Make sure that it's up to code, that it's safe, that access is appropriate. And then there's the other side of things, which is the enforcement through penalties or fines, and revocation or suspension of licenses. So, we've noted a couple of things here, but this really allows for this is where the oversight and the consistency comes in for the town, and transparency as well. And it can be applied across the board as well. And so it's quite equitable, and really is supporting that planning framework. Next slide, please. So getting into our recommendations, we've weighed all of the options that are detailed more fully in the recommendations report. But based on everything that we heard from the community, based on what we heard from stakeholders, based on feedback from council in the fall, the first time that we presented to you, a few things kind of sort of started to bubble to the surface in terms of what really makes sense for LaSalle. So that is to really introduce clear zoning that addresses STRs, as well as the existing provisions for bed and breakfasts that are in the town zoning bylaw and official plan. And then it's to permit STRs townwide, but apply that principal residence requirement. And then finally to enforce the planning regime through a licensing bylaw. And this really makes sense, we think, for LaSalle for a couple of reasons. One is there isn't that cottage industry in LaSalle. LaSalle's, it's mostly residential, and it's mostly, most of the housing stock in the town is built and intended for full-time residents. So this helps protect housing supply and availability. And then it helps minimize nuisance or any other sort of impacts on residents or health and safety in the town, because there's on-site accountability from the operator living in the STR. And then finally, it just provides a good basis for administration and for oversight, because the other sort of unspoken option that I don't have in here is prohibition, just completely disallow them. And in our opinion, that is, it doesn't allow for any oversight. It doesn't allow for any accountability. And really, it just puts the onus on the town to having to be, for lack of a better analogy, whack-a-mole STRs, trying to prohibit them. And this is a much more open, transparent, and enforceable and administratable framework. Next slide, please. So in terms of the actual recommendations for what would be in the amendments to the planning framework, it would be two parts: one to the town's official plan, one to the zoning bylaw. So the real meat of the regulations would be in the zoning. So our recommendation is to very clearly define an STR in the zoning bylaw. Define it as a unit that's rented for 30 days or less. It's the operator's principal residence. And then include bed and breakfasts within that, sort of nested almost. But make sure that this is excluding traditional accommodations like hotels, motels, country inns. In addition, it would exclude things like group homes or lodging homes, which are, those are permanent residences. And this would avoid, leaving a gap where somebody could, operate a short-term rental, which is actually just sort of a rooming house and so many, and, without calling it that. In addition, like I said, the bed and breakfast definition, which exists in the zoning bylaw, would be sort of nested within that short-term rental definition. And it really is just a type of STR where meals are provided. And then finally, the agritourism provisions that are in the zoning bylaw can be amended to reflect the changes to the STR and the B&B definitions. We don't see any reason not to continue the town's current planning approach, which is to permit B&Bs in the rural area, and to help use that to support agritourism. And then these zoning provisions would be supported by just some necessary official plan amendments as well. One is to amend the existing B&B policies that are in the OP to speak to STRs. There's also a condition currently in the OP that bed and breakfasts are only permitted through a zoning bylaw amendment. So we would recommend removing that and just permitting them as of right, but regulated in the zoning bylaw. And then, noting that any other regulation occurs through the zoning bylaw itself. Next slide, please. In addition, we'd recommend that some general provisions be added to the zoning bylaw, just to really make clear what and how an STR is to be operated. So these provisions would include noting that an STR is an accessory use to a dwelling unit that is a principal residence. So it's a bit of a belt and suspenders for the definition. Only permitting one STR per lot, so not allowing, for example, for clusters of tiny homes that are operating as STRs. Permitting them only in zones where a dwelling unit is permitted, so not allowing them in your commercial zones, your mixed-use zones, unless it's within a dwelling unit. Applying parking minimums. I think this is an important one that may sort of get lost in the shuffle a little bit, but making sure that there's sufficient parking for guests in addition to the residents of the dwelling unit, so that it's not creating unnecessary parking issues, especially with street parking. Not permitting STRs in any sort of accessory structure or building, or in boats, for example, that aren't dwelling units. So I mentioned earlier a backyard ARU, that's a full dwelling unit, but somebody's garage shouldn't be operated as an STR. compliance with building and fire code requirements, which again could be enforced through the licensing framework. And then finally, permitting basement STRs. So if somebody has a basement that they want to, rent out as a short-term rental, allowing that, but only where there's dedicated exterior access. So not requiring somebody to have to go through the home necessarily of the person to access it. And that's as much I think a fire and a health and safety requirement as anything. Next slide, please. So just our final sort of recommendations here are related to licensing. I think there's a lot of different ways of licensing. And if you look at various short-term rental licensing bylaws across the province, there's quite a variety of detail or approaches. So these are some of the core elements that we would recommend. WSP's supporting town staff, and we certainly don't have all of the nuances and understanding of enforcement within the town. So there's probably lots of really specific things to LaSalle that would need to be considered. But of that, our recommendations would be that a license, this is sort of the baseline, the license is required prior to operating or advertising an STR, so that you can't list it before you've gotten a license for it. Applying the license requirement across the board to existing STRs as well as new ones. So this would be applying to legacy STRs that are operating already. Everybody would have to come in under the umbrella. Typically what we see with best practices across the province is that it's a 1-year duration, and then there's certain conditions or contingencies for renewal, which the town could choose to apply, and that the big one is inspections. The license being non-transferable, so the operator is the licensee, and it can't be transferred. And then the operator as well, again, yet another belts and suspenders to the zoning is that the operator must be the principal resident. So this would require proof of the principal residence, and I think that it can occur in a few different ways. In addition, as I noted before, if the owner isn't the operator, then we'd recommend requiring that the owner, that there's proof of owner consent and sign off on it. Insurance, and then having an enforcement framework. And again, based on best practices, we'd recommend consideration of a two-part enforcement framework. One of which is fines, but also demerit points, so that there's sort of you don't have individuals operating STRs who just sort of consider fines the cost of doing business. Having a demerit point system where eventually your license can be revoked is a pretty important part. So that's sort of the end of our consultant recommendations, and I will turn it back over to your clerk just to walk through the staff recommendations. But I did want to speak just very quickly to one comment that we received on PlaceSpeak. So the recommendations report was posted on PlaceSpeak for public review, and we received a comment that I think is a really good encapsulation of what a good STR framework can help support in the town. So a resident wrote in that they are operating an STR in their home currently. It's not a separate unit. It's just, space within their home. They've been diagnosed with cancer and are off work. And so this short-term rental for them is helping supplement income. It's also acting as a place for their caregivers and family to come stay. And so I thought it was a really, it's a really important comment and feedback to raise to council, because I think that's a good example of it's someone who lives in the dwelling unit and is just renting out part of it in a short-term way. It's helping them, and they have oversight. They live in the area, and they're not taking away a home from somebody who could live there full time. So I think that's a sort of a really good cogent example to bring up. So, okay, so I'll pass it back over to your clerk or whoever from administration wants to walk through the recommendations.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to go through the report now, or if do you want me to have council ask some questions? Okay, with that?
However council wants to do it.
We'll do that, and then we'll go through questions, and then we can go through those recommendations. So members of council, if you've hopefully had the chance to review the full report from administration as well as the one presented here today, do you have any questions or comments regarding what's been presented? Councillor Carrick?
Sorry, just around, I like the direction. I like the accountability, because if we don't do nothing, then it's going to be wide open, and chasing it around and trying to do bylaw enforcement will be really costly and hard to keep up with. So at least there are some mechanisms here in place. And I think the accommodation tax, hopefully, when we get it, that'll help offset some of the costs for the town, which is important, as well as the licensing and other things. I guess my question is around parking. That to ensure parking spaces, but when we're doing dwelling units or whatever, we're building buildings, they're only like 1.5, 2 cars per unit. So how would we distinguish that from something like that, or would that just carry over, if that makes sense?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's a good question. So the way we're looking to set it up is for every STR request at that property, you would have to accommodate an additional parking space on top of what is already required in the zoning for if you're a single detached or an apartment unit, exactly like you had mentioned. That would have to come into play. I think that is part of when we review the licensing and the permitting. Can you show proof that you have that space? And if not, then I would assume that it wouldn't be approved.
Okay, thank you, that's good.
Just on that real quick, when you say parking spaces, you're talking on the property. That doesn't count spaces on the road.
That's correct. The road is our town property. They would have to accommodate that parking space on their own private property.
Thank you. Councillor Regis Spagnolo?
Thank you, through you. Great report, thank you. I do have a couple of questions that I jotted down. One comment I do want to say is I really think that we should be implementing the demerit point system. I like that because it's more accountability than just a fine. I do have a question for the bylaw team. Do we have capability, like does your team have enough resources to keep enforcing these bylaws? That's one question.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Currently, right now, we only have the one bylaw officer, so it does present some challenges, especially since most of these STRs operate on weekends. So when we do the review with the appropriate building, fire, police, we will identify the resources required in order to make it effective, because we do want it to be successful. So there's no reason to put a licensing regime in place if we don't have the resources to effectively control it.
That's great, thank you. And yeah, I like it. I think it just offers control and transparency and accountability. I just think it's great to implement it, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burns?
Okay. First off, with parking, I don't know how you can control that. I rented an Airbnb in Hamilton for 11 people. We probably had 5 cars there at different times. And there was nobody in the building. I rented it. They give us a combination to the house. We went in. Everybody slept. And at one point, there was 15 of us there. We had a nice breakfast. It was a 3-bedroom home. And we respected everybody else's stuff, around us, and we had no problem with it. So that's the experience that I see when I'm going to a special function like the Grey Cup was in Hamilton. I don't want to live with the owner, and I don't know what you call a dwelling. To me, if the owner is going to be there, that's a B&B, and I've rented those as well. And that's fine. In the morning, they give you breakfast, you take your shower, and you leave. If you're there a couple of days, that's it. What we're talking about here is that when somebody comes into a unit, and what controls that you're saying is bylaw, the first control is going to be police. They're going to get the call, not the bylaw officer. And the policeman's going to go there and say you're not in compliance and keep the noise down, and He goes, and maybe after the third visit in the evening, he or she gets charged. So a lot of this report is very vague in my estimation, because what I'm interested in is how are we going to enforce it? What kind of fines are we going to put in place? And you may say that comes later, but I think the residents are asking that of us, particularly the gentleman that just left. He's been living with this catastrophe for 2 years. And we're no closer. The recommendation is to put it off to budgets of next year, which means the report will come back in 2028. So to administration, and yourself, those are my comments. And what you presented, I don't see working at all. But that's me. And from my experience, I wouldn't be interested in sharing a house with another family if I'm bringing my family and 3 or 4 others. So, and I know that in our group that goes to the Grey Cup, we rent plenty of these things. And we actually prefer a private residence versus going to Motel 8 or whatever you can get. So I think even our administration, when went to AMO, rented a house. But so I know there's more to come, but I guess we'll go from there and see where council goes. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Segan.
Through you, Mayor Malash. I see the need for a comprehensive bylaw, having lived in a situation where for about 10 years, we could not enjoy our backyard because of noise and nuisance. And luckily, finally, after, from spring all the way to fall, it was just ridiculous. So I sympathize with the residents that have this nightmare to have to deal with. As a matter of fact, when our speaker who left, I canvassed down that street and I saw the parking craziness. And I wondered, are there 5 families living there? Because I didn't know it was probably a short-term rental unit. But, we had some challenging budget deliberations this year regarding staffing. And I feel that we must get much more detailed information as far as perhaps the number of units that are out there, the potential revenue from licensing that would be able to be garnered in juxtaposition, to our obligation is to operate and enforce any kind of bylaw that we have. So I'm concerned that the impact this would have on the levy and therefore the tax-paying residents of LaSalle. So I support the recommendation of moving this to 2027 budget deliberations, because I just think it's too quick to be able to have the right answers, a more comprehensive look at the financial implications.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I have a few. The first one I had, in the report it says only 1 STR per lot. What exactly does that mean? So Mr. Peterson presented that the house next door to him, I believe, has 3, right? 3? So there's 3 inside 1 residence. Is that still allowed, or are we saying there's 1 rental and that is it?
So yes, Your Worship, the idea behind that would be that there's just 1. So the how that gets enforced, probably it could happen in a few different ways. It could happen through the licensing. There also may be a bit of nuance on that front, but the idea is so that a house isn't getting divided into multi-units just in order to be operated as multiple STRs on the same lot. The actual zoning provision for that probably would be a little bit more detailed and have the sort of legal language to really clarify.
I assume stronger wording was coming when we get to that phase of things, but I just wanted clarification on that because I'm still slightly confused between a operator and an owner. And when Councillor Burns mentions that he doesn't want to be in a house where an owner is that what we're saying? That the person's going to be there, or they're just simply the person who's signing the license because it's their primary residence, but they're not necessarily going to be staying there during the time it's rented out?
Yes, that's the second part that you said is correct. So basically the framework that we can put in through zoning and then, to enforce through licensing can't really sort of, can't enforce how people choose to operate the STR or how people rent it. But it doesn't, the operator, it being their principal residence doesn't necessarily mean that they're on site when they're renting it out. It could be, there's a lot of, and part of the reason why we haven't gotten incredibly detailed in that is that you can really get in the weeds in terms of the number of different configurations. But, two good examples probably would be, somebody has a basement that isn't a full unit. Like it's got a bedroom down there and maybe it's got a bathroom. And so they operate that as an STR. So, they're always upstairs, you rent it, you have a place to stay, but you're not necessarily with them. The other one would be the example I used. If somebody has, say, a dwelling unit that they live in, but they're going away for 4 weeks and they want to list it on Vrbo or Airbnb. And so, they can rent it out while they're gone. But that's their permanent residence. It's not, they haven't bought the unit just to operate it as an STR. They live there and they just happen to be gone. So it's, those are the scenarios. It's not necessarily one or the other. It's that they're, they live there permanently, they're responsible. And then the owner operator question, I know it's a little bit, it's hard to distinguish because you could be the owner and operator, but this just leaves the door open for people to be able to operate STRs if they are not the owner. So, the example of, the resident who wrote in who's, dealing with a health crisis and operating occasionally an STR out of her own home. If she were not the owner, it would seem sort of inequitable to not allow her to do it just because she doesn't actually own the building. And so that's the idea behind really distinguishing operator from owner.
And so again, there'll be very clear language coming forward on how we would put that into a bylaw, because I agree with council's comments, like being able to effectively get people to comply is going to be the hardest part of this whole program. But I believe wholeheartedly in it. I do think we need to have this in place in the town of LaSalle and to protect the residents who currently live here. And so I think we do need to have some restrictions and some guidelines. And I know that's coming, and that's part of that business plan that's being recommended by administration. And that will also address some of the financial matters I know we've been discussing here as well, is there is going to be needed staff time. We don't currently have that in our profile. It's not something we do. So we know for us to implement this program that we're going to have to look at how we staff that and how we pay for that. And so the goal obviously is going to be that the costs should be recouped through those licensing fees or the fines if people don't comply, but that's part of that business plan that we do need to come back to us. And then just one correction I did want to make regarding mat tax, if we decided to do it, and I hope that that also comes at the same time as part of this, like a bylaw, because that would be part of the collection and part of the wording that would need to go in there, that they'd have to comply with that as well, and make sure that they submit that. So I want to make sure those are together. But mat tax, when it's collected by the people who come and visit our town, not by our residents. And those funds can only be used for tourism aspects in the community. So it couldn't go into offsetting this program, I don't believe, according to what Tweppy told me. It has to be used for like a tourism type of event or communication or advertisement, but it couldn't offset this program. So just so we're aware of, those funds won't go towards this program. Yeah, no, that's okay. The mat tax is collected for tourism. That's why it has to go through Tweppy and be collected by a tourism organization. So just wanted to make sure we were clear on that. I think it's a good report. I agree with what you've put forward and the recommendations that you put forward. I am disappointed that we're looking at deferring this to budget time, but I also understand it's a very busy year for us, and that is a lot of work that needs to be done in a short period of time. So I hope we can get moving on the next part of this, and hope that when this comes to budget, whoever council is at that time believes in this program and supports it, and make sure that we have the staff to be able to do this, because compliance is going to be key. So that's all I have. Councillor Birds?
Okay, you haven't addressed, and it's happening in this world as we speak, I go to Australia for 3 months. So I meet my mate down there and we correspond over the internet, and I get his house, his car. He comes to LaSalle, he gets my house and my car, and we exchange properties. Is there anything that you have in those situations? Because I know it does go on. It won't necessarily be in LaSalle, but I know in Toronto that's happening. Whether I rent you my condo and I take your condo, but you know what I'm referring to here. And if you have any examples of that.
Through the mayor, to the councillor. Yeah, I think home sharing, I think, is the term for what you're referring to. So, yeah, that's been going on for a long time. In that case, it wouldn't really fall within an STR definition because it's not, there's no exchange of monetary value, and there is still the sort of responsibility of the homeowner or the, you know, the people that are swapping homes. I don't, yeah, I do like I've never seen a short-term rental framework that has addressed home sharing or home swapping like that, because then, you know, that's just, you know, there's no exchange of money. It's just to, you know, individuals using their property, I think, to their, you know, which I know you could sort of argue is anything that's regulated, but I've definitely never seen it be addressed in short-term rentals.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
No problem. I think that also probably wouldn't fall because it's more than 30 days, right? So that wouldn't fall into this program either way. And I agree. We're going to have a lot of work still ahead of us. There's still some things we definitely need to figure out. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure we're protecting our residents. And last summer, I received more complaints than I have in any year before regarding short-term rentals, noise complaints, and parking cars everywhere. And it's really affecting our current residents. And so this program is extremely important, and I support what has been put forward this evening. And I will leave it to council if you have any questions for administration, and otherwise, if you have a motion or if you support the recommendation. Sure.
Okay, so I'm just going to review the recommendation for council. So this evening, administration is looking for council support, that council support the implementation of this proposed regulatory framework to govern the short-term rentals within the town of LaSalle, and direct that administration hold the statutory public meetings under the Planning Act to consider the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, and that council supports deferring consideration of the short-term rentals regulatory program until 2027 budget deliberations, where a corresponding business plan for its implementation will be presented to council for consideration and action. I just want to be clear, when administration comes back with this business plan, it is not going to include a fully flushed out bylaw. We will not be bringing forward a draft bylaw at that time. What the business plan is going to be able to do for us and for council is provide some timing with respect to the bylaw development. It is a technical exercise, and as Councillor Segan noted, this isn't something we want to rush or hurry. We want to make sure that we coordinate with the requisite departments. It will be a multi-departmental exercise where we involve fire and bylaw and legal and council services to make sure that we're covering all our bases and making sure that we're meeting the needs of each department that's going to be involved in this program. We will have a good idea at budget deliberations of what the framework, that regulatory framework, is going to look like, which will give us information, be able to inform the resources we need so that when we come back to council, council will have a better idea of what the costs are of the program. I know there was some comments this evening about the cost of the program, and Ms. Beggs' report discussed the different mechanisms to recoup some of those costs, but I think it would be irresponsible for us to suggest that any fees for the program or fines are going to be on a full recovery basis. This is not going, the fees and any fines or penalties are not going to be able to fully supplement what the program is going to cost. But at budget deliberations, we'll be able to tell you what resources we need so that council's fully informed and gives us to give us the go-ahead or not, or whatever direction is at that time. And then additionally, we'd be able to say when the OPA and ZBA adoption and approval would come forward. I think the plan is to bring the bylaw and Ms. Beggs may correct me or may not, it may not be her plan, but I believe those bylaws and the OPA amendments would come forward either at the same time as the bylaw or very close to when the bylaw would be implemented and adopted. Because once the zoning bylaw changes and the OPA changes get adopted, it will be hard for us to regulate if we don't have the corresponding bylaw in place, that licensing framework in place. And then, like I said, the additional resources. So if there are no other questions, those are the recommendations from administration this evening. But if there are questions following, we can certainly try to answer any additional questions that might have come up.
Councillor Carrick, did you have something to add? Okay, Councillor Burns?
Okay for that. But again, I would like to see, knowing people the way they are, I'm not paying the fine. So where do we get our money? If he or she refuses to comply, refuses to pay the fine. I've been through this in other areas on council. So I'm, in the back of my mind, is there any way the bylaw can attach those fines to the taxes against the property? That's what I would be looking for you and your team as you get together to come back with something that whoever the operator is, and he or she's the owner or limited company, that we have that. We may not get it the day that we go to court, but when they go to sell the property, then we'll get our money. Some sort of guarantee on that, because to hire people and have no guarantee of income, it's very costly. Just a comment, you don't have to respond to it, just what I was thinking. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing that.
No problem. Mr. Militia is going to comment, though.
Again, not perhaps specifically to Councillor Burns's question, but on an overall basis, I just want to reiterate what Ms. Astrologo has mentioned, is that, you know, our plan is to start to, you know, have the public meeting that is statutory and start to continue to go through this process. It will be incumbent on council to provide resources at budget time in order to do this program. I mean, I think I can't stress that enough. I think the report indicates that, as well as the comments by Ms. Astrologo. Again, and I don't want folks to leave this conversation thinking that we are at the end. We are midway through is probably the best way I can describe it. And there's work for us to do. But in order, again, what is of utmost importance in this process is, one, to get the regulatory framework correct, and two, to get the enforcement framework correct. And so they both have to happen. It will just create more frustration if we implement a regulatory framework without having the enforcement resources behind it. And that's just that we've seen that in other areas, and we really don't want to go down that road. We need to, if we're going down this road, we need to be prepared to understand that there will be some revenue offset, but that revenue offset, it will not cover the costs of delivering this service. And so I just want to make that clear, it's particularly those in the audience and those that are watching online, because I don't want people to go away with the impression that we're at the end. We're not at the end. We're in the middle of this. There's work to be done. And as the recommendations outline, they are there. There are some steps that we need to take prior to the budget, and then there will be, you know, a decision that council makes at budget, and then post budget, assuming that the decision of council at budget is affirmative, then there will be further work to be done, and then eventually we'll get to implement. So we're in the midst of a longer road here, and I don't, like I said, I know I can appreciate some of the residents' frustrations about what they're going through, but I don't want them to leave and think that there's a solution around the corner. It will be some time still.
Thank you very much. No other questions? The recommendations before you? Okay, moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Richo Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much for the presentation. Moving on to item 3, which is the Volmer Arena spectator netting, and we're going to have our Director of Public Works, Mr. Osborne.
Thank you, Worship and members of council. As part of the 2025 budget, an item was included for the replacement of the netting at both arenas at the Volmer. The budget number was $20,000 that was in the budget. We've recently received quotes for actual installation, and the low quote came in at $35,000. The main reason for the difference is when the kind of, call it budgeting, quoting process, it wasn't really a quoting process, but getting those numbers in the summer, last summer, the number or the type of netting that was used for that was a lower quality than what we actually needed. So when we quoted at this time, that came to light that to get the quality we require, it was actually $35,000. So that's the reason for the difference in the price. So this report is really to seek the approval of the additional $15,000 from the facilities reserve to move ahead with that project. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richo Spagnolo.
Thank you through you to Mr. Osborne. What's the lifespan for this netting, since now we're getting a better quality one? So I'm assuming it's going to be better than the last one.
That's a great question. I don't actually know the answer. I know the ones that are there have been there for quite some time. I could find that out and find out for you though.
Okay. Any other? Councillor Segan.
Through you, Mayor Malash, just question, what's the exact difference between the two types of netting?
Thank you for the question. I have to admit, I'm not the expert on this. I got subbed in at the last minute for this report. Again, I could find that out and let you know. Other than the quality is the only thing I know at this moment, but I could find that out if you want.
Okay, yeah, I'm just interested. And further question, perhaps, for Mr. Langlers, what's in the reserve right now? What's the balance in there?
Give me 2 seconds, I can pull that up. So right now in the facilities reserve, which also includes some of the buildup for future buildings, there's $7 million in that reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? That carries. Item 4, the ice cleaning machine sponsorship. Our Director of Strategy and Game, Ms. Hadre.
Thank you. Mayor Malash and members of council, the report before you talks about an ice cleaning machine sponsorship draft agreement. And we're asking that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign an agreement between the town and Ernest R.J. Bondy Insurance Brokers for the sponsorship. Administration was approached by Bondy Insurance with interest to sponsor the ice cleaning machines. At that time, we started researching best practices and comparisons of similar municipal agreements. And we came up with a draft 5-year agreement. That agreement includes an expiry date in 2030. Upon that expiry date, the sponsor will have the option to renew on an annual basis for the remaining useful life of the ice cleaning machine. And at that time, we will look at any sponsorship increases. It's a total payment of $5,000 sponsorship per year for both machines. The town will print and install the wrap on both machines. The estimated cost is about $3,500 for each machine. And the town will determine if either wrap is damaged beyond wear and tear, if repair is needed during that term. The town will replace the wrap if a new ice cleaning machine is needed during the term, and we'll make sure that that's in place once the new machine is purchased. I am available if there are any questions. It's a pretty simple agreement, and Bondy Insurance is very excited to be able to partner with the town on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Segan.
Just get some kind of understanding here. So 5,000 sponsorship per year, and it's 3,500 for the wraps. So 2 wraps, so 7,000. So we don't gain any revenue till the second, third year. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Richo Spagnolo.
Thank you through you to Ms. Hadre. I like the idea of the sponsorship. I know this is great. So these are the two Zambonis that are at the Valmer. Are we thinking of doing something at the one at the Loop?
No, the one at the Loop has been named. It was named through one of the contests that we
Yes.
did, the naming contest. So no, we will not be wrapping
There
that.
won't be a, okay.
Counselor Carrick
The Zambonis we have.
or Counselor Burns?
Oh, sorry. Oh,
That's okay. That's all right. You go ahead. Counselor Burns, go ahead.
the young.
No, so, you know what, I'm just gonna move forward. Thank you. Okay, so again, along with Counselor Segan, so basically we're putting in $7,000 up front, but we're getting 25,000, so it's a net gain of 18,000 basically. Is that what I'm thinking or what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for that, Counselor Carrick. If we're going to do these machines this year, are we replacing any machines next year or the year after? So what is the longevity of the machines we have there, given it's the cost to rewrap them?
Mr. Mara.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. This agreement has been aligned with the replacement of the machines. That's why we're going with that 5-year term. There is one that's going to need to be replaced in about 5 years, so that's why we set this term. So we're just at that sweet spot right now to align it with the machine's useful life. So it should work out fairly convenient for this particular purpose.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? There being none. Recommendations of the report of the Director of Strategy Engagement dated February 5th, 2026, SE-01-2026 regarding an ice cleaning machine sponsorship be received, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign an agreement between the Town of LaSalle and Ernest R.J. Bondi Insurance Brokers, 1991 Limited, for the sponsorship of the ice cleaning machines at the Valmer Center. Moved by Councillor Richo Spagnolo and support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. Item 5 is the Fleet Purchase Roads Department excavator replacement. Mr. Osborne.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. So this report is for recommending the purchase of a John Deere excavator to replace our existing machine. We did receive 2 prices through our buying group. There are a couple notable differences between the 2 machines. So the John Deere excavator came in at $300,000. The Komatsu came in at $285,000. The Komatsu is a little bit of a smaller size than the John Deere. It is not set up to run our brushing machine, which is a major component of why we use the excavator. And then Komatsu also doesn't have a local servicing location. The closest is London. So with the price difference being around 5%, we're recommending to move forward with the John Deere at $300,000. That still is within our budget of $350,000, which was part of the 2025 budget and available for questions.
Thank you.
Move the
Councillor Burns.
recommendation.
Any questions? We'll have mover support by Councillor Carrick. And questions or comments?
Again, thank you for the report. I just think it's the emphasis is on being able to use the brushing machine, because that's important for a 5% difference. To be able to use that with a heavier machine makes much more sense. So thank you for that.
Okay. Well, Councillor Carrick, did you second that? Okay. So we have Councillor Segan just in case. Okay. All in favor? And that carries. Item 6 is the Senator Juanita Overland Flow Analysis. Mr. Osborne.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. So this report is in follow-up to a previous council report of August 2025, where we discussed the potential paving of Senator Juanita and how that's related to the DMAF project. As a result of that meeting, administration went back and did some further engineering analysis and costing analysis for what were the recommended solutions from the environmental assessment. So we have that, and I'll present that to you now. The storm sewers, the storm solution was a series of storm sewers and 1 pump station for those streets. That would cost about $15 million. And then there's also some overland flow and shoreline protection work that would have to occur. is also $15 million. But those are all on private property and would have to be borne by those property owners. So if we just look at the 15 million alone for the storm sewers and pump stations, that's already outside of what we can accomplish through the DMAP project. It's simply too much, let alone getting into the complexity of all the private property work. So for that reason, we're recommending to not proceed any further with those storm improvements on Senator Juanita. The thing that goes along with that is that we, have to accept the existing level of service that we have on those streets from a storm perspective and from a flooding perspective. It's completely dependent on the levels in the Detroit River. So the kind of second part to this now is to talk about the paving. So we can at any point really proceed with regular mill and pave on Senator Juanita. In the 2026 approved budget of $1.5 million for mill and pave is really already allocated to Disputed Road. We feel we'll use most of that for the Disputed Road project. Therefore, our recommendation is to do the mill and paving on Senator Juanita in 2027. What that could result in is, if council, our recommendation is to go with 2027 paving for Senator Juanita. If council wanted to proceed in 2026, we would need an additional $300,000 approved this year to proceed with that work in 2026. And in 2027, we'd have to look at that budget and whether we should be reducing that down to 1.2 million instead of the regular 1.5 million. But that's really something that would be confirmed at budget time. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Members of council, Councillor Carrick.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, when we were at the meeting and they were all here, understanding that we went through the process and to do it right is very expensive. To actually make sure that draining and everything is covered for in the grants and everything. But if I'm not mistaken, I think we said that we would try to find a way to help make that happen sooner than 2027. If we couldn't do it through the drainage process. I remember talking about paving the roads. So I'm just wondering if there's a reserve where we can take it out of, if that's possible, as opposed to pushing it back to 2027. And then in 2027, if we need to take some of that 1.5 million to offset or put half of it back, or even over a 3-year period, put 100,000 back each year until it's back in the reserve. So that's what I'm asking and see if that's possible.
Worship, members of council. Actually, Mr. Osborne and his team and I actually met earlier today to start looking at some of the capital projects that are coming up. So what I would recommend is if we want to do it this year, we can absolutely do that. Our budget's $1.5 million. We'll increase it to 1.8. And next year's mill and pave for 2027 will be reduced by the same amount. So we can do it a little bit faster and then just reduce the following year's budget by a little bit, because we do have some larger beyond mill and pave projects coming up in the near future. We don't want to take away from those.
Thank you. I just want to know if we can take it from a reserve and put 100,000 back each to build the reserve up, rather than taking the whole 300,000. That's basically what I'm asking. Not taking 300,000 from the 1.5. Is there somewhere we can draw the money from and then give it back 100,000 as opposed to almost 1%? That's, I guess, what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. We could do 300,000 extra this year, and then instead of 1.5 million for the next 3 years, we'll do 1.4 million. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah, if we, in future years, if we increase our budget to our capital budget to roads, we can pay it back that way as well.
I certainly appreciate the comments. I know how hard this is because we went through a budget session. It was very tough. But I think we made comments about helping these people out. And I think this is the option that we come up with, and we're not going to be able to do the drainage. And I think we seriously need to look at it doing it this way. Your worship, that's how I feel.
Thank you. Councillor Burns.
Okay, do you have any idea what the surplus is? If we're going to have a surplus this year, and what would that be?
This year, we're not going to have a surplus. It's going to be very close. And the reason for that is in previous years, we've had a surplus because of the high interest rates. The rates continue to drop. and that's kind of been a little bit of a cushion for us. Now, since the interest rates are dropping, that's going to drastically reduce any surplus we have. We're getting pretty close to the final numbers, and it's going to be pretty close to even.
Thank you.
Councillor Regis Spagnola.
Thank you, through you, to Mr. Osborne. If this were to be approved, what would be the timeline?
We'd be able to put the tender together pretty quick and get it out to do as part of this construction season, but it would be, part of the summer construction season, I would anticipate.
Any other questions or comment? So just to clarify, because I'm shocked there's no residents here, so just in case anyone goes back to watch this video, the recommendation not to move forward with storm improvements is mainly due to the price tag, but 15 million would have been borne on the residents. They would have had to come up with that funding. Am I correct on that?
$15 million worth of work would have had to occur on private property. The mechanics of that, I'm not even sure how that would happen. It sounds quite, I'm sure it would be quite complex and complicated.
Okay. And when was the last time we did this road?
I think it was when the sewer went in 1990 or whatever year that would have been, the sanitary sewer.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because we're doing the regular mill and pave, and I just want to make sure that since we're well aware of the flooding that's unfortunately possibly could occur, that this type of finish is okay, knowing that we're going to have those other issues.
Yeah, I mean, this is whenever you're rebuilding a road, when you're repaving a road, especially of this age, we can expect to go back and have to repave it 20 years from then again, or 25 years and then 20. It will just keep coming. We're not really fixing the road, but the cost is kind of prohibitive at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Burns, did you have a question?
There was supposed to be a pumping station down there that was never built. I think it was contract 13 when we put in all the pumping stations. I guess the one caution I have is that Sunnyside Boulevard is a private road, which we don't own. And if we pave it, then do we own the road, and do we own all future expenditures on that road, which does not have any sewers at the present time? So it's not very environmentally friendly.
Thank you for the question. We're not paving Sunnyside. We're just paving Senator, Juanita, and Manhattan.
Thank you. I would make a motion to go and expand and reduce next year's budget by 300, and let's get it done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have a seconder on that motion? Councillor Segan? Oh, do you have a question? Go ahead.
I like the friendly amendment of just putting it back over 3 years as opposed to taking it all. If that's possible, building in $100,000 extra to put back into the reserve we're taking it from, so it's a 1.5 next year. So I'd like it to come from a reserve. So we're not taking 1.5 out of the budget, so that we can put it back slowly to build up the 300,000 we're taking. So that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to damage this year's 1.5, but I want to take $300,000 out of a reserve and then pay it back 100,000 a year over the next 3 years, so we're not damaging the 1.5 this year. So that's what I would like to see. If that's friendly, I don't know if it is.
I don't think it's friendly, but I also, just to clarify, it's not taking it from this year. This year's already spent on disputed. And it is, the 300,000 is coming from reserves, because it says here the roads reserve. So it is coming from a reserve. It's just next year, we're going to reduce it to the 1.2 to, you don't want to do that. So I can call the question first, and then if it's defeated, then if you want to make a motion.
Okay, we can do it, but we'll make sure that we put the 300,000 back in for next year then.
Okay. Something to put.
If I can clarify, I think the motion as it sits right now is that we will We're going to spend the $1.5 million as planned on disputed. We're going to spend an additional $300,000 on Juanita and Senator. That money is going to be effectively bridge financed, if you will, this year, and will come out of next year's work. So in 2027, we will only do $1.2 million worth of work. The budget will be 1.5 million as it normally is, but we will only do $1.2 million worth of work because we're pre-spending effectively 300,000. That's what the current motion is.
Okay, can someone make a note of this and we bring it back so that if we have to borrow from the general reserve to put it back and then put it back slowly over time, so be it.
I think just to clarify, so 1.5 next year is still part of the budget, but only 1.2 is going to the roads. The 300 is going to go back into the reserve that we're using this year.
Right, so we're losing $300,000 of work next year.
Right.
So my concern is we should take it out of a reserve, other than the road reserve, put it back in, they pay it back a year, 100,000 a year over the next 3 years, so that that money stays at 1.5 next year. So we're not losing $300,000 to do the work next year. We can take it and then slowly pay it back over 3 years. It's like a loan to ourselves.
I understand what you're trying to get to, Councilor Burns, or Councilor Carrick. However, that's not what the motion is. The motion is that we'll take it out of next year's work.
So, okay. So at this time, I'll call the question, and then if it fails, then we can get Councillor Carrick's motion. Okay? So all in favor? That carries. Okay. Moving on to item 7, zoning bylaw amendment for the removal of the holding symbol Z03 2022 for the Trillium Development. Our Manager of Planning Development, Ms. Brisick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Getting my presentation up here on the screen. Okay, so this application Z03 2023 is for an H removal at the subject property, which is located on the northwest corner of Elmdale and Wyoming. It is currently vacant. It is currently a designated residential district, as you can see on the left image up on the screen. And on the right image up on the screen, it's representing the current zoning, which is residential zone 4 with that holding symbol, which again, they're seeking to remove tonight, or requesting to remove. The applicant has brought forward a development proposal for a 7-story residential apartment. Again, this is solely just residential. It'll consist of 148 residential units to be supplemented with 222 dedicated parking spaces. Up on the screen here, this is the site plan that we've been provided as the administration has been undertaking site plan control for this application. And as we are nearing completion with that and in drafting of the agreement, here before you to presenting the report for the H removal. The proposal does conform to all areas of the zoning bylaw, so there's no issues with that. And our engineering team has reviewed the proposed development for conformity as well and has assured that servicing, all municipal servicing is available for the site. And here up on the screen, I've included a site rendering. So this is kind of, I imagine you're kind of exiting the school area and looking at the site. This is what you will see on that corner. So with that, it's recommended that council support the recommendation and that a bylaw to remove the H symbol will come at an upcoming council meeting. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Hi, just to add on to Ms. Brisick's presentation, I think council might have noticed that there is some work happening on the site just recently. So what that is we've entered into a pre-servicing agreement with that developer. They had some specific drain work that had to be done prior to a date in March. I forget the exact date, but there are some timing restraints due to that. So we entered into a separate agreement just for those specific works. It does not mean there's guaranteed approval for the development. So it's a bit of a risk on the developer's part, but also kind of allows them to ensure that, you know, if they are going to proceed, that this work is done in the complied time. And that's what you see going on there. So I don't believe they'll be there very long, but that's what that work is.
Thank you very much. Members of council, questions, comments? I do have two. Does anyone else have one? No? Okay, go ahead. Councillor Carrick?
Yeah, sorry, so for that area, is the structure able to go as high as 8 floors or 10? There's an 8, I think 8, right? Does that make sense? Just being nosy.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, there is a height restriction. I can double check in the zoning, but there's no issues with the 7 stories. We have assured that it is compliant with our zoning bylaw.
Further, your worship, through to Jonathan. So when you said drainage issues, so it's not a guarantee, but they're working on it, and that's when I drove by there, I saw the extra pre-site materials there. So can you kind of explain it a little bit more? Because that could be a big thing.
Yeah, I know that it's not drainage issues so much as the timing, because they're going into Turkey Creek. So from an environmental regulation standpoint, there's certain windows where work can happen in the drain and when it cannot. So because they have to tie into that drain, they have to enclose one of the drains and tie in a couple other spots into Turkey Creek. That work can't be done. I think it's March 15th, after March 15th. So it's really just to ensure they're able to get those specific pipes in before March 15th. Then they'll likely leave site. We'll finish the agreement and approval process, and they'll be back likely to do the regular building work and servicing work. So it's just a very few specific pieces of storm pipe that have to go in now.
So, okay, so we went, on that, we went through the flow, the water flow, and the overflow into Turkey Creek, the reports. So this doesn't, this is well within the amount that would be allowed.
Yep, this all fits within what can go in Turkey Creek.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so mine has more to do with the intersection. I think it's Elmdale. Is there not Elmdale? Wyoming. Are we looking at upgrading that intersection? Because right now it's got the stop sign. And I've already had complaints from people in the area who see everyone turn at Starbucks, drive as fast as they can so they don't have to hit the lights or go to the roundabout. They get ahead of those people and they drive really fast in the 30-kilometer zone. And so people are saying we need additional signage or stop signs at that intersection already, with an additional 200 and something residents coming out. I'm assuming we're looking at are we looking at making that a 4-way stop, or how are we going to use that intersection, especially with the school?
There was traffic work report done as part of this application. It did not recommend any 4-way stop or always stop there, sorry. What it did recognize was some of the improvements that had actually already been made at Todd Lane and at Malden Road when it came to the signals. So it's really more of, you know, if those signals weren't there, that this might have triggered those signals at this point in time, but it doesn't recommend an always stop there. That is something we could review through our kind of always stop analysis, but to keep traffic moving more, it is almost better to not have it as an always stop.
So maybe we could look at that at some point, and or traffic calming, because I see it all the time. The people see the red light at Starbucks and they take a right, because if they go down right and they go over 50, they're beating all the cars who are going the roundabout. And with that increased traffic at that condo unit, I do worry about potential accidents, and especially during that morning and afternoon period with the school. And the second thing I was going to ask is, and I'm not a huge fan of no parking, but at the same time, again, with that school, everybody parks on Elmdale. Even with that great new addition to the school, that drop-off zone, people are still parking on the sides of the streets there. And so I don't know if that's something we're going to have to also consider as this development goes, is how do we make sure that that's not becoming a problem?
So with this development, we will be adding curb on Wyoming or Elmdale there, sorry, like on Wyoming and Elmdale where there isn't curb, and likely be putting alternating parking on it. So that I'll have to confirm with the team, but I believe that was the approach we were going to be taking. It would limit some of the school parking. Not to say they still won't do it, maybe, I'm not sure, but that was the plan, was to go with alternating parking. And that work the school did do has been a tremendous help, and we thank them for doing that, because that's been huge.
You know, I agree with you. It was great, and a lot of people were very thankful for that option as a safe drop off for their kids. And I do think if you put the curbs and gutters, that'll probably take care of that, because right now they pull onto the gravel, right? And they let their kids out of the gravel, and they pull out, and it's just very dangerous. So thank you for that. I'm okay with everything else in the report. I don't have any other questions, members of council. Moved by Councillor Segan, support by Councillor Richo Spagnuolo. All in favor? And that carries. All right. Our consent agenda has 5 items. Are there any items anyone wants to pull out and speak to directly? Councillor Burns.
I think that we should discuss item 2 from Perry Sound and support this. Municipal support for school bus safety and stop arm cameras, etc. I think I was shocked in this report to see that, 30,000 times per day, people are breaking the law. And I don't think it's any different in Perry Sound than in LaSalle. So I would like to have this move forward and support and send to the Honorable Stephen Clark, Minister, House Leader, as well as Doug Ford, I would include, and municipalities of Ontario.
Okay.
Thank you.
So item 2, we want to vote for that first to support. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. And then we just need to receive the other 4 items. Motion to receive. Councillor Carrick and Councillor Richo Spagnuolo. All in favor? And that carries. Committee matters. There's just the one, which is the County Council highlights from February 4th, 2026. Any questions or comments? There being none, just a motion to receive those. Moved by Councillor Carrick and support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? That carries. Questions and statements by council members?
Question, I guess, to through your worship to Jonathan, on the Sorge Park, when will the sign go up? I've been asked by the family a couple times. Just approximate date would be fine, and they'd like to be notified so they can have some dedication there.
Still don't have a date for you, but we are starting to look at getting the sign made. They're fairly unique signs, the way we make them. So we're starting to look into that component of it, getting the sign made. And when it's ready, we'll try to aim it for kind of a nice weather, and we'll let the family know when it's going to be in. No.
Fairly easy to
warm.
make.
Sometime when it's warm.
1st of May should be good weather.
Councillor Carrick, did you have something? No. Just waiting? Okay. I have something, if I can turn the chair over to you.
Okay, thank you. So Mayor Meloche, would you like to read out your motion?
Thank you. Yes. So obviously this winter has been a little bit more unique than the ones we've had in the past. And so we definitely did get more complaints than normal. But at the same time, I think this is something we need to look at. And that comes to our snow removal policies regarding vehicles parked on the road, as well as removing snow from property in front of properties. And so we don't really have a great bylaw surrounding that right now. So I'm looking for a report from administration, and that's a review of snow event parking regulations and sidewalk snow removal requirements, whereas winter weather events create operational and safety challenges related to roadway snow clearing, on-street parking, and pedestrian accessibility. And whereas parked vehicles on municipal roadways during snow events may impede snow removal operations and create safety concerns for motorists, pedestrians, and emergency services. And whereas the town does not currently have a bylaw requiring adjacent property owners to clear snow and ice from municipal sidewalks, and whereas safe and accessible sidewalks are important for residents of all ages and abilities during winter conditions. Now therefore it be resolved that council direct administration to prepare and bring forward a report within the 2026 calendar year reviewing 1, potential amendments to the parking bylaw related to on-street parking during snow removal and winter weather events. 2, the feasibility of implementing a formal snow emergency event declaration process, including criteria, communication protocols, and enforcement mechanisms. 3, the feasibility of implementing a bylaw requiring adjacent property owners to clear snow and ice from municipal sidewalks, including timelines for compliance, enforcement mechanisms, cost implications, liability considerations, and municipal comparators. 4, any required amendments to the related bylaws. 5, operational, legal, and financial implications associated with any proposed changes. And further, that administration consult with legal as part of this review and report back with recommendations for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mayor Malash. Anyone wants to second the motion? Councillor Burns seconds the motion. Any further toward the motion? No? Okay. So I will call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion has been carried. I now turn the chair back to the mayor.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Segan?
I'd like to express my condolences to the family of Deputy Mayor Mr. Ekpata and the passing of his father.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
Yes, so I'd like to make a motion that we make a donation to Play for the Cure again this year of $2,500.
Okay, moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Richo Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. No notices of motion, no closed session today. Our bylaws is that the following bylaw be given a first, second, third reading and finally passed. 2026-011 being a bylaw authorized execution of a transfer payment agreement between the Corporation of the Town of LaSalle and His Majesty the King and Right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Infrastructure. That's just the one. Councillor Burns and Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. And our confirmatory bylaw 2026-013 be given a first, second, third reading and finally passed. Councillor Segan, Councillor Richo Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Schedule of meetings are listed below. Thank you again. Have a good night.